Anti-China rhetoric is on the rise in the U.S., with U.S. President Donald Trump and his administration leading the charge. But one U.S. former politician has called it over the top and reminiscent of the McCarthy era in the U.S., which saw a wave of serious accusations being made without regard for evidence. How alarming is the situation, and what does it mean for the future of China-U.S. relations? I was pleased to be joined by that very same person, Max Baucus, former U.S. ambassador to China. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us. In your recent interview with CNN, you said that the U.S. government's rhetoric is reminiscent of the McCarthy era, where red baiting was used to attack communists. You also compare the anti-China rhetoric to Hitler in 1930s Germany, adding that if anybody says anything reasonable about China, he or she feels intimidated, afraid his or her head is going to be chopped off. So McCarthyism or Hitler, very strong comparisons. What prompted you to say that?
Well, I think that the main point I'm trying to make is somewhat reminiscent, not nowhere close to that yet, but somewhat reminiscent of the McCarthy era and somewhat reminiscent of Germany in the 1930s. That is, each person, Joe McCarthy, Adolf Hitler, is making many, many statements based on nationalism. In McCarthy's case, it was more anti-communism, and riling people up, making people believe things that really were not true. But at the same time, in not only the United States, but also in Germany, a lot of smart people, very intelligent people, people who knew the facts, people who cared about their futures, knew that a lot of what those two men were saying was wrong, was causing more problems than it was going to solve, but they were too afraid to speak up. It would be politically incorrect to speak up. And they're afraid if they spoke up, they're afraid if they spoke truth to power, if they said something publicly that maybe was responsible, not to attack McCarthy, not to attack Hitler, but just say, hey, this isn't right here. We've got to find some way to have an honest discourse here, and not people did that. And that led to a lot of problems in America in the 1950s. And of course, over in Europe, it led to World War II. But my main point is that the United States government today, in the White House and some in Congress, are making statements against China that are so over the top, that they're so hypercritical. They're based, some of them, not on facts, or if they are based on facts, it's sheer demagoguery. And that's what McCarthy did in the 50s. He was an outright demagogue. If that continues like that, then we're going to have deep problems between the United States and China. It's going to get worse, and it's going to stir up the American people against China unnecessarily. And it's going to stir up the Chinese people against America unnecessarily. That's what I'm trying to say. We're trying to say if right-thinking people who want to talk about the facts, who care about the relationship, should speak up, and then we have a discussion on the facts, but not based on demagoguery. Speak up.
Would you like to give an example or two, for instance, to underline what you've just said, on which issue, for instance, you have seen exactly what you described?
What is the origin of COVID-19? Almost all scientists, medical officials, believe that the origin was at Wuhan, at a wet market. But there are many U.S. officials say, no, that was it came not from a wet market, from a lab in Wuhan. And they're going to make the next point, at least implies the next point, that maybe that was intentionally released. And they're doing that somewhat intentionally, not all. Some will speak about the origin of the virus, or based their statements on what they believe the facts to be. But some are also stirring it up to cause even more American angst and criticism of China. And frankly, there's a point now in the United States where some Americans think that maybe China intended all this to happen. That is total rank nonsense. It's crazy. one develop a virus that hurts its own people. That's just on its face, idiotic. But nevertheless, that's some of the politics is involved in America today, and is stirring up unnecessary discontent between the two countries.
You say some right-thinking people are either afraid or feel that they might be intimidated for speaking up, for saying, hey, this is crazy, this is not the right thing. How widespread do you perceive this is happening, and what are some of the factors that make them feel that way?
Well, I think it's fairly widespread. I think some of the right-thinking people I'm talking about are members of the United States Congress, and even specifically on the Republican side. In the Senate, a lot of them know it's not as bad as President Trump or the administration or some very right-wing senators saying, but they're afraid to say anything because in the United States today, if somebody in the Republican Party, especially anybody of any stature in the Republican Party, were to criticize the president, well, the president would exact immense retribution. He'd pillorise that person. And these people are talking about their senators. They want to get reelected back at home in their home states. And so they're afraid. And they're afraid to speak up.
How strong is that pressure? For instance, when you speak up like this, are there any pressure or people already talking to you, hey, you know, you're comparing America to the McCarthy era, you know, in the back, and even to Nazi Germany? How dare you? You know, how could you make that kind of comments?
Yeah. Well, frankly, I'm getting a lot more praise than I am criticism. Praise in America and praise from some Chinese. You speak up about what you believe in, and frankly, in the end, the truth, I think, tends to win out. So it doesn't bother me. But there is some criticism, but mostly it's from the very right-wing blogs on the internet, more than is it in the press in America.
Well, that's at least good to hear. But going forward, are things going to slip further down that very dangerous path, according to your senses? Or do you think there might be a chance that people realize what they're doing, what is happening, and put a brake on things?
For the next several months, that is, most of the rest of this year, up until the presidential elections, the first Tuesday in November, things are going to probably get a little bit worse because President Trump is criticizing China. And frankly, he is pivoting from bragging about how well the economy is doing in the United States in order to get re-election. He's pivoting away from that and pivoting toward criticism of China. But I do think that a good number of people in America know that this is just political. However, it is having an adverse effect, causing Americans to think more critically of China. I also think that in the Chinese government, a lot of people in the Chinese government also know that this is, quote, political, that both Vice President Biden and Donald Trump are criticizing China in order to get reelected.
What could have possibly explained the reminiscence to McCarthyism or 1930s Germany? And now you have abundance of knowledge. People travel, people read much more. You have social media where people see things happening in different parts of the world. People talk to each other more. You would feel that the democratic institutions are much stronger and so on and so forth. And yet, how come we have this danger looming here?
In not too many years, the economy of China will exceed that of the United States. That's concerning to America. That causes angst in America. What's all this all about? We're used to being number one in the world. We're not used to being maybe not number one in the world anymore. It's huge. It's huge.
I just feel, okay, China's rise is causing a lot of angst, a lot of anxiety, and people are concerned about it. But what has been some of the domestic factors which could have paved the way for this kind of sentiment to arise?
Well, part of it's our rising unemployment. But when you're out of a job, when you're trying to make ends meet, you get very scared. And when you're scared, there's a psychological tendency to want to blame somebody for your condition. And it's easy to blame China because China is so big, such a big economic power. But I think the internet causes some angst too. And social media causes some angst as well. We Americans are not focusing enough on our own economic development. We should be doing what China's doing. We should be developing our infrastructure. We should have high-speed rails like China's. We should spend money on airports and airline terminals and railroad terminals and also technologies of the future. AI, big data, robotics. The stronger you are internally, and you're confident in yourself, and you got a sense of yourself, the more you're able to influence somebody else. So the same is true in the United States. If our country is strong, economically strong, by that I mean we didn't have the homelessness that we do in America. We wouldn't have nearly as many people unemployed today as we do in America. And we didn't have the income inequality that we have today in America.
Moving on, what do you think can be done domestically in the United States and in China? My sense is that whatever China says, either from the Chinese government or from the official media, it's always just cast away as propaganda, so it's not transparent, it's not to be believed. Whatever numbers that China give is wrong, it could be much, much higher, for instance, for the COVID-19. It seems that there is a profound mistrust in the American society towards anything that comes from the official side of China, and that makes it impossible for the Chinese side to do anything, really, because anything you say, it's considered to be opaque, to be, intransparent. What do you say to that, Ambassador?
The Chinese government, the American government, could say many things. It can issue many press releases. It can issue many white papers. All that's very interesting. But what really counts is what's behind it. Is it actually implemented or not? And let's say, for example, China would go ahead and buy all those products, energy, agriculture, manufacturing products that it promised to buy, and that'd go a long way too. That would be big in the American press. American press would see that. And at the same time, Trump would have to lower the tariffs that he promised.
It's very, I think China would want to do that, because otherwise China wouldn't have China wouldn't have signed the Phase 1 trade deal in the first place. If they sign it, they know the world is going to hold them to scrutiny, right? It will make yourself look very stupid if you sign something and not do it in the end. But at the same, I think China is ready to do the purchases that it has promised to do, but on the other hand, for instance, after this epidemic broke out, with all of this very, very strong, very, very hostile rhetoric and all kinds of them coming out of the White House, the China way, it makes the atmosphere very, very difficult, very unfriendly. Yeah, it makes it impossible. Yeah, it makes it also very difficult for China to carry out the purchases it has agreed to do. And it makes it difficult to answer the question, answer the sentiment to the domestic Chinese population, because they read day in, day out what is being said about China, about the Chinese people even, that they are associated with a virus and so on and so forth. So there is just not that kind of atmosphere, right, to turn words into action as they should be.
Makes it much more difficult, no question. It makes it much more difficult. But that does not totally excuse it. Both sides, both ways. Even though the atmosphere is more poisonous and more toxic, even though it makes actions more difficult, that does not excuse inaction. We still should do our very best, in my judgment. I know it's hard. It's very hard, believe me. That goes to the basic point I was making in that CNN interview that you're referring to. Namely, there's a lot of toxic, excessive criticism in the United States against China, which is causing more problems than it's solving. And a lot of smart, right-thinking people are afraid to stand up and address it.
So what is the first step you would suggest to both sides? I think China wouldn't want to have this war of words. It's kind of compelled to make all of these rebuttals, you know, all of these false statements coming China's way. So China feel it needs to respond. So it came out with this long rebuttal with 24 points, trying to debunk a lot of the theories that come out of the United States. But I think on China's own, it wouldn't want to waste this kind of words. It wouldn't want to draw attention to this kind of words. But what can be done? One starting point, if you were to suggest, Ambassador.
Well, we can take a page from the medical profession, which is, first, do no harm. First, stop the criticism. Stop at least the public criticism. Once either country criticizes the others publicly, that makes it almost impossible for people in the other country to want to work with the other. It's public criticism never works. And it should be private if it should be criticism. Number one, stop the public criticism both ways. Just stop it.
That might help. I think a lot of people are wishing that. It really takes a lot of steadiness, let's say strategic patience, maybe.
It does take a lot of strategic patience. And it's unfortunate that too many people, at least in America, are not sufficiently patient. And they're not strategically thinking about the long-term relationship. They're taking a short-term, easy route by criticizing and using facts which they know to be untrue or don't know. And that's almost as bad. Some of this is irresponsible, some of it is ignorance, but still, there should be much more patience. And it's, you know, when you're a public servant, you've got to really be a true servant, sort of trustee of the people, which causes a lot more work to do the right thing.
We really hope something would happen to fix this relationship as soon as possible. Thank you so much, Ambassador Baucus, for your time. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Li Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching.